The courtroom in downtown Seattle was dead silent. I stood at the defendant's table, hands resting lightly on the worn wooden edge. My brother Michael rose from his seat across the aisle, adjusted his navy suit jacket, and looked straight at the judge. "Your Honor," he said, voice loud and clear. "My sister Sarah Thompson has been practicing law illegally for the past 14 months. She gave legal advice to our late father's estate, drafted documents, and even represented family members in negotiations. She is not a licensed attorney. I demand this case be dismissed and that she face full disciplinary action." He didn't look at me once, not even a glance. I said nothing. I just stood there, breathing steady, eyes forward. The judge, the Honorable Elena Ramirez, leaned forward slightly. Pen paused above her notepad. Michael continued, "This isn't personal. Your Honor, it's about protecting the integrity of the legal system." A few relatives shifted uncomfortably in the gallery. My mother clutched her purse tighter. I still didn't speak. That was March 12, 2025. King County Superior Court, Courtroom 7B. The moment my brother tried to destroy me in public. But what Michael didn't know, what no one in that room knew, was that I had been waiting for this exact day for 11 months. And the judge? She was about to become the person who ended it. Let me take you back to where it really started. It was April 2024. Our father, Richard Thompson, had passed away 2 months earlier from a sudden heart attack at age 67. He left behind a successful commercial real estate portfolio in the Seattle area worth roughly $4.2 million. Warehouses in South Seattle, a small office building in Bellevue, and 3 residential properties. Dad's will was clear. Everything was to be divided equally between me and Michael. But Michael had other plans. At the first family meeting in our father's old house in Ballard, Michael arrived with printed spreadsheets and a confident smile. He was 38, a mid-level corporate lawyer at a firm downtown. Always the golden child who went to law school while I became a paralegal. "Sarah," he said that evening, sliding documents across the dining table, "I've already spoken with the estate attorney. There are some complications with the commercial leases. I'll handle all the legal side. You just sign where I tell you." I looked at the papers. They gave him sole decision-making power over the commercial properties for the next 3 years. I asked simple questions, standard stuff I'd seen 1,000 times as a paralegal at Miller & Associates. Michael's face tightened. "You're not licensed, Sarah. Don't play lawyer. Just trust me." I signed nothing that night. Over the next weeks, things escalated quietly. Michael started calling our aunts and uncles, telling them I was overstepping and trying to interfere with proper legal process.
He changed the locks on Dad's old office without telling me.
He hired his own attorney to represent the estate, someone from his firm, and tried to freeze me out of important meetings. I stayed calm. I took notes. I kept every email, every text, every voice message where he mocked my questions. By June 2024, I noticed something strange. 2 of the commercial tenants had received new lease agreements with higher rents agreements that weren't reviewed by the original estate attorney. The extra money was being directed into an account I couldn't access. When I asked Michael about it directly, he laughed. "Stay in your lane, little sister. This is real law, not paralegal paperwork." That was the first time I decided to document everything in a separate folder on my laptop, labeled simply, I didn't confront him. I didn't cry to our mother. I just worked. During the day, I continued my job at the paralegal firm. At night, I sat at my kitchen table in my small apartment in Capitol Hill and studied every relevant Washington state statute on estates, unauthorized practice of law, and fiduciary duty. I reached out quietly to a retired judge, my old boss, new judge, Ramirez's former colleague. I asked for general guidance, never specifics. I built my case carefully. Michael, meanwhile, grew bolder. In August, he filed paperwork claiming I had been giving legal advice to our cousin Laura about her divorce. He submitted a complaint to the Washington State Bar Association. They opened a preliminary inquiry. I received the letter in September. I read it twice, then placed it in the folder with everything else. Still, I said nothing. By November 2024, the tension in the family was thick. Thanksgiving at Mom's house was unbearable. Michael sat at the head of the table, carving the turkey. Like he was already in charge of the entire estate. Sarah's been causing problems. He told our Uncle Frank. She thinks she knows better than licensed professionals. It's embarrassing. I ate my food in silence. Later that night, while everyone watched football, I stepped outside to the back porch. The rain was light and cold. I stood there for a long time, phone in my hand, rereading old messages from Dad. In one voice note from Christmas 2023, he had said, "Sarah, you've always had the better head for details. Michael's flashier, but you're the careful one. Don't ever let him steamroll you." I saved that message. Around that time, I made my first quiet move. I hired a real licensed attorney, not to represent me in court yet, but to review everything. I had prepared. Her name was Rebecca Lang. She met me in a small cafe near Pike Place Market on a rainy Tuesday. After 2 hours of going through my folder, she looked up at me. "Sarah, this is very well documented, but you have to be extremely careful. If you cross the line even once, Michael will use it." I nodded. "I know, that's why I haven't said a word to him." Rebecca smiled slightly. "Most people can't stay silent this long. You're playing a different game." That conversation gave me confidence. I continued gathering
Bank
statements, lease amendments, screenshots of Michael directing tenants to pay into his personal LLC instead of the estate account. Over $87,000 diverted in 4 months. I never once gave legal advice to anyone. I asked questions. I suggested they speak to licensed attorneys. I documented Michael's overreach, but he kept pushing the narrative that I was the problem. December 2024, the Bar Association scheduled an initial review meeting. Michael showed up with a thick binder and a smug expression. I arrived with my own folder and said almost nothing. I let him talk.
He painted me as someone who had been secretly running a shadow legal practice from my apartment. The investigator
Listened carefully. I answered only when asked. Short, factual answers. On the way out, Michael stopped me in the hallway. "You should have stayed quiet, Sarah. Now everyone's going to see what you really are." I looked him straight in the eyes for the first time in months. "I am staying quiet, Michael." Then I walked away. That night I added 3 new documents to the folder. One of them was a certified letter from one of the tenants stating that Michael had personally told them I had no real authority, and that all decisions went through him. The pressure built through. January and February 2025. Michael filed the formal complaint in Superior Court, asking for an injunction against me handling any estate matters and demanding I pay legal fees for wasting court time. The hearing was set for March 12th. I prepared like never before. I barely slept the week leading up to it. I reviewed every page with Rebecca. We rehearsed what I might say if I chose to speak, but my plan was simple. I would say nothing until the right moment. March 12th, 2025. Courtroom, 7B, that's where we started. After Michael's opening accusation, the judge looked at me. Double quotes, "Miss Thompson, would you like to respond?" I stood slowly. "No, Your Honor, not." At this time, a murmur went through the small gallery. Michael smirked, leaning back in his chair as if the case was already won. Judge Ramirez raised an eyebrow but didn't press. She allowed Michael to present his evidence first. He called his first witness, his own attorney, and began walking through documents that supposedly proved I had practiced law without a license. I sat perfectly still, taking occasional notes but mostly just listening. Inside, my heart was steady. Because I knew something. Michael D.I.D.N. single quotes. Judge Elena Ramirez had actually presided over a very similar estate case. 2 years earlier, one that involved unauthorized practice allegations. And more importantly, she had seen my father's name before. Dad had appeared in her courtroom in 2019 on a commercial dispute. She remembered the family, but I hadn't counted on that being the decisive factor. I had something much stronger. The hearing continued for nearly 2 hours. Michael grew more confident with every document he submitted. He painted me as greedy, jealous, and dangerous to the legal profession. At one point, he said, "Your Honor, my sister has always resented that I became the lawyer in the family. This is her way of trying to get back at me. I still said nothing. The judge called a short recess at 11:15 a.m. during the break. My mother came over, eyes worried. "Sarah, honey, maybe you should just let him handle it. The family's falling apart." I hugged her gently. "Mom, trust me. Just a little longer." When court resumed, Michael was ready to deliver his final blow. He stood up, holding the bar complaint letter. "Your Honor, I ask that you rule today that Sarah Thompson must cease all involvement in the estate and reimburse me for legal costs exceeding $14,600 so far." Judge Ramirez looked down at the papers, then back up. "Mr. Thompson," she said, her voice calm but sharp. "Before I make any ruling, I have some questions." Michael smiled. "Of course, Your Honor." That's when everything began to shift. The judge turned a page slowly. "Mr. Thompson, on August 17, 2024, did you personally contact tenant David Ruiz at the South Seattle warehouse and instruct him to redirect rent payments to a new account controlled by your LLC?" Michael froze for half a second. I was managing the estate, Your Honor." Judge Ramirez didn't blink. "And did you tell Mr. Ruiz that your sister had no authority and that any questions should go only through you?" The courtroom grew quieter. I still hadn't said a word, but I knew the folder on my table, the one I hadn't even opened yet, contained the sworn affidavit from David Ruiz himself. And that was only the beginning. Asterisk. The judge's question hung in the air like smoke. Michael shifted his weight. "Your Honor, I was simply streamlining payments for efficiency. The estate account had delays." Judge Ramirez nodded once, slowly. She picked up a document from her bench. "Mr. Thompson, I have here a sworn affidavit from tenant David Ruiz, dated February 28, 2025. Would you like to read it, or shall I summarize?" Michael's lawyer leaned over and whispered something. Michael waved him off. "I'd like to see it, Your Honor." The bailiff handed him a copy. I watched my brother's eyes scan the page. His jaw tightened. The color started draining from his face. The affidavit was only the first page in my folder. Judge Ramirez continued, voice steady and professional. "Mr. Ruiz states that you told him Sarah Thompson had no legal standing, that she was playing lawyer, and that if he spoke to her, the lease would be terminated. He also states that you increased the rent by 18% without proper estate approval and directed the difference into an account under Thompson Capital Partners LLC, an entity you control personally." Michael looked up quickly. "That's a misunderstanding. I can explain." "Sit down, Mr. Thompson," the judge said calmly. He sat. I remained standing at the defendant's table, hands still resting on the wood. I hadn't opened my folder yet. I didn't need to. "Not yet." The judge turned toward me. "Miss Thompson, you still choose to remain silent at this time?" "Yes, Your Honor," I said quietly. "Very well. Let's continue." What happened? In the next 40 minutes changed everything. Judge Elena Ramirez had been on the bench for 17 years. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She simply started pulling apart Michael's story thread by thread. She asked about the lease amendments. Michael claimed they were standard. The judge produced copies I had quietly submitted 2 weeks earlier through proper channels. Each amendment showed Michael's signature and his firm's letterhead, but no approval from the estate's official. Attorney Dot then came the financial records. Over $87,000 diverted. Michael tried to say it was management fees. The judge asked for invoices. He had none. At one point, Michael stood up again, pointing toward me. "Your Honor, this is exactly what I warned about. She's been collecting documents, manipulating tenants behind my back." "Mr. Thompson," the judge interrupted. "You filed this motion accusing your sister of unauthorized practice of law. You submitted a complaint to the bar. You asked this court for sanctions and reimbursement of over $14,000. So let's be very clear about who is accusing whom." The gallery was completely still. My mother had tears in her eyes. Uncle Frank stared at Michael like he was seeing him for the first time. I still hadn't said a word, but inside, I felt every month of silence paying off. Then came the real turn. The moment no one saw coming, Judge Ramirez lifted another document. Thicker, with a court seal. Mr. Thompson, are you aware that on January 9th, 2025, the Washington State Bar Association opened a confidential investigation into your own conduct regarding this estate? Michael froze. His lawyer looked genuinely surprised. The judge continued. I received a sealed summary this morning before court. It seems your sister was not the only one under review. You advised multiple family members on estate distribution, without disclosing your personal financial interest. You also used your position as an attorney to pressure tenants while simultaneously acting as a beneficiary. That, Mr. Thompson, walks very close to several ethical lines. Michael's face went from pale to gray. I finally opened my folder, not dramatically, just enough to pull out one last page and hand it to the bailiff. The judge read it quickly, then looked at Michael. This is a letter from Rebecca Lang, licensed attorney, confirming that Sarah Thompson worked under her direct supervision for all estate-related communications. Starting in October 2024, every suggestion, every email, every tenant conversation was reviewed and approved by Miss Lang. Miss Thompson never held herself out as an attorney. She asked questions. She gathered information. She protected the estate. The judge looked directly at me for the first time with something like respect. Miss Thompson, you may speak now if you wish. I took a slow breath. I looked at my brother. Michael, I said, voice calm and clear. I never wanted to fight. I wanted you to do the right thing. Dad trusted both of us. You chose to steal from the family instead. My voice didn't shake. I didn't cry. I simply stated facts. I have spent the last 11 months documenting every single move you made, not because I wanted revenge. Because I promised Dad I would protect what he built. The courtroom was so quiet you could hear the clock on the wall. Judge Ramirez ruled from the bench that same afternoon. She dismissed all charges against me. She ordered Michael to repay the full $87,400 he had diverted plus interest within 30 days. She referred his conduct to the Bar Association for full disciplinary review. She removed him as any representative of the estate and appointed a neutral third-party administrator. She also ordered him to pay my legal costs, $9,850. When she finished reading the order, Michael looked like someone had punched him in the stomach. He tried to speak, but the judge raised her hand. We are done here, Mr. Thompson. The gavel came down. Outside the courtroom, the hallway felt too bright. My mother walked up to Michael first. She didn't hug him. She just looked at him and sighed. Your father would be ashamed. She turned and hugged me instead, tight, for a long time. Uncle Frank shook my hand. I should have listened to you months ago. Michael stood alone near the elevator, staring at the floor.
His lawyer was already on the phone, probably trying to limit the damage. I walked over to him. He looked up.
For the first time in years, there was no smirk, just fear. Sarah, I was under pressure. The firm, the bills. I thought if I controlled everything, I cut him off. You thought I was weak because I stayed quiet. You were wrong. I didn't wait for an answer. I turned and walked away with my mother and Rebecca Lang. That evening, back in my apartment in Capitol Hill, I sat at the same kitchen table where I had spent so many nights building my case. I opened my laptop and transferred the entire folder to an external drive. Then I deleted it from my computer. It was over. The next weeks were quiet, but powerful. Michael paid back the money by the deadline. He had to sell his new BMW and take a loan. The Bar Association suspended him for 6 months pending full investigation. His firm placed him on administrative leave. The estate is now being divided properly. I kept the 3 residential properties. Michael received his share of the commercial ones, but with heavy restrictions and oversight. Family dinners slowly returned to normal. Not perfect, scars like this don't disappear, but honest. In May 2025, I received a letter from Judge Ramirez herself. A personal note. You showed remarkable restraint and preparation. Not many people can stay silent when everything is on the line. That restraint won the day. I framed it. It hangs in my small home office now. Looking back, the hardest part wasn't the evidence or the court. It was choosing silence every single day when I wanted to scream at my brother for betraying our father's trust. I learned that sometimes the strongest move is to say nothing until the right moment. Until the truth has nowhere left to hide. Michael tried to call me once in April. I let it go to voicemail. He said, "Sarah, can we talk? I want to make this right." I never called back. Some bridges burn for a reason. Today, I still work as a paralegal, but I'm starting law school in the fall. Not because I need to prove anything to Michael. Because I finally proved something to myself. Family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the people who choose honesty even when it hurts. And justice? Sometimes it wears a black robe and waits patiently for the right evidence to appear. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening to my story. Now I want to ask you something specific. What is the hardest betrayal you've ever faced from a family member? And did staying silent help you? Or did you have to speak up? Tell me in the comments. I read every single comment. Everyone,